All right, so fantastic to see so many people joining already. So welcome all to yet another PTC Talks, where we are excited today by having Jonathan Tipper and Jan Nichols from our alliance partner Accenture for a session on generative AI in the manufacturing industry. But first, a very quick introduction by me. So my name is Torbjörn Peterson, and I'm the alliance manager for PTC in the Nordics, leading these webinars where we invite customers and partners for some inspiration on digital transformation to see what is possible and how to make things happen. And we are running these webinars on Fridays at the same time, 3 times a month, with topics around either manufacturing, services, or engineering. And of course, we are also recording these sessions to be found on the registration site. And the agenda for today is first a quick overview of PTC by me, and then Jonathan and Jan will run the show by introducing themselves and Accenture. They will touch base on a few challenges, how to address these, and then explain some of the business outcomes. And at the end, we are also having a Q&A session, so please keep your questions to the end, or you may also put them in the chat and we will pick them up during the Q&A. Now over to the next slide, Jonathan. Just a quick overview of PTC. So PTC is a global software company with a headquarters in Boston, and we providing marketing leading solutions on IoT, augmented reality, PLM, SLM, ALM, and CAD through the digital thread to help companies to accelerate their digital transformation. And AI has already been sort of integrated into several of PTC's solutions, and we are also currently doing some research on using generative AI. So now over to you, Jonathan and Jan.
Great, thank you, Torbjörn, and thank you, PTC, for inviting us today to talk to you about generative AI in manufacturing. I think we're going to start with an audience poll. So 2 questions. Is your company actively experimenting with generative AI? And the second one, do you use generative AI in your daily workflow, in your day-to-day job already in some way? I'd just like to get a feel for those 2 things before we get going. If you could reply on the poll.
There we go.
Okay, starting to see some results coming through there. So far looking like 70%-ish, actively experimenting already, and using it. And the second question, do you use generative AI in your daily workflow yourselves? About 34% saying yes so far. So interesting to hear, because I think this is a very, very hot topic for everyone in many dimensions, and we're going to talk about it in manufacturing today. So thank you for responding to those. I think just to give us some context, and we'll come back to some of what we're seeing with Jonathan in a short while. So thank you for that. I think by way of introduction, my name is Jan Nichols. I lead Accenture's manufacturing practice in EMEA. And I'm sure everyone here, I hope, is familiar with PTC. But just in case you're not familiar with Accenture, very briefly, we are a global professional services company with nearly 750,000 people. We help our clients with strategy, consulting, technology, operations, customer experience with our strong practice, lots of different ways. And around 7 years ago, we formed a new group called Industry X. And what we do in Industry X, as you see on the left here, is we focus on the digitization of engineering and manufacturing. And in very simple terms, we help our clients with the things that they make or manufacture and the way that they make them in product design and engineering. If you move to the next one, please, Jonathan. Industry X, we're a global practice of around 26,000 people. We work with all the other parts of Accenture as well. And this is just to give you a flavour. We built this group over the last 7 years, a significant number of acquisitions on the right-hand side, where I've highlighted some of the manufacturing skills that have joined the Accenture family. So whether that's in manufacturing execution systems, digital technologies, OT, robotics, this is a strong part of Accenture's global team now. And as I say, I lead our manufacturing practice for EMEA. So just a little bit about us. If you move to the next one, Although Industry X is only 7 years old, we've actually been working with PTC for more than 20 years. PTC are one of our strategic partners, and as you can see on the left here with the numbers, we've done a lot of projects and implementations together, with the PTC suite. We're lucky enough to have won a number of awards that you can see there in the bottom right. And that's looking backwards. I guess looking forwards, and the topic of today, when a new disruptive technology like generative AI comes along, what we do immediately is sit down and think, well, how could we leverage this to help our clients? What value and benefits might it bring to them? And then we sit down with PTC and we look at, well, how is the product roadmap and the features going to take advantage of this new technology and to achieve those benefits? So that brings us to the next slide, which is the question that how are we approaching generative AI for manufacturing? And I'm going to hand over to Jonathan, who's going to give you a bit of an overview of that now.
Thank you, Jan. And hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Tipper and I'm the generative AI lead for our Industry X practice in Accenture. Over the next around 20 minutes or so, I'll cover quite a lot, focusing on how we've approached unlocking value from generative AI for manufacturing industries. You'll see some of the validated use cases and the value opportunity, and I'll also share a little bit of a view of what we've learned along the way over what has been a crazy last year. It isn't going to be too deeply technical, but we should have time at the end for some questions. And of course, you're welcome to follow up with me via email or LinkedIn if there's anything of interest that you want to actually go deep on. So I guess Happy New Year is in order. Welcome to 2024. 2023 kicked off the era of generative AI. So it was, for many of us, exciting, surprising. AI was absolutely everywhere. And every company made some sort of announcement, often including a pivot or an investment. It seemed like every day, new research and technological progress was dropping daily on every sort of social media with claims of how it would impact us in our daily lives and in work. And the thing is, it wasn't hype of what will happen in the future. I think I can tell from the poll already, anyone who's tried ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, any of the consumer available generative AI tools out there immediately understood how transformational this was going to be. And it looks like 2024 is going to be more of the same momentum. Even this week at Davos, AI is one of the most dominant topics for all leaders who are in attendance. But it's also an era of great expectations. Every industry leader, including Accenture in our own leadership, started anticipating how generative AI could improve things or disrupt things in our own business. We had messages from aerospace and defense, from consumer goods, from automotive, from all of our different industry teams on the client side and our own leadership, anticipating what value this was going to bring and what we needed to do. And to solve some of those and to really get an understanding of what this would achieve, we started running a lot of rapid experiments to build these out and understand them for ourselves, but also for our clients in the manufacturing industries. Unfortunately, there isn't time today to show you all these use cases in action. So this is a bit of a placemat. And this isn't the exhaustive list by any means of things we've actually done in the manufacturing industry space with generative AI. But I'd say these are the most valuable and proven from a tangible perspective. We followed a very strict methodology to make sure this isn't just demos, but is actually measuring value, impact, and adoption. And I'll explain some of these that you're seeing on the screen in the next few slides. So don't worry if it's a bit overwhelming seeing all these figures. But I guess we need to explain what makes these, Operation Twin Copilot, Virtual Mentor for Manufacturing, these plugins for various tools, what makes them generative AI instead of just digital? And I think we can answer that in 3 different ways. So the first is new content generation. It seems obvious, but that's the main thing that differentiates generative AI from traditional forms of machine learning. A GPT in ChatGPT is a generative pre-trained transformer. So the 2 demos you're seeing kind of loop on the right-hand side cover test case generation for software-defined vehicles, where we're taking requirements and generating the test case, and then from the test case, generating the test script. And those requirements can come in the form of words or image prototypes. We've done it with both. And the second one is generating technical publications in the automotive space. And it's taking all the features and details about the vehicle, putting it into the right structure and framework, and actually generating that document. And both of these have seen reductions in effort for the people who currently have to build them by around 40 to 50%, freeing them up to do a lot of other higher value activities further down the value stream. So these are very, very tangible, very, very practical examples. The second one is more to do with how you get the most out of your data. All of you will know in the manufacturing space, data is key, right? And if you can get hold of it, it's very valuable, but it isn't always easy when you've got all that data to get actionable insights. It's a big problem that we often hear. And a lot of this industrial data isn't in the public domain. So ChatGPT and all these models, they haven't seen it and been trained on it. But by using them in clever ways, we are able to interact with that industrial data in more conversational, dynamic ways. The two examples you're seeing here, the top one is dynamic digital dashboards coming from industrial data, where just with a few requests about, what's the latest KPI in OEE, can you plot it on the latest over the last 2 months, can you plot trends? We're doing it through conversation. And on the bottom, if you have an operations twin, we've taken our operations twin in Accenture and added a co-pilot assistant to it to help with root cause analysis or identifying key trends, just through talking to your factory or your plants and your assets. The third part is more to do with co-pilots. So this is where we start to get into co-pilots, assistants, virtual mentors, whatever the term might be. It's about human augmentation and conversational interfaces. And this is where those AI agents get integrated directly into your existing workflows. So this is quite a long loop of different things that you're seeing on the right, but we've integrated these into your standard operating procedure data, into logbooks, into some tools involved in model-based system engineering, and even into PTC Codebeamer to do requirements quality checks natively within the tool, using generative AI there to support with all of the same ISO standards and compliance. So this is where it starts to truly augment what you're doing in the workflow, which is really key. I appreciate that's a lot to take in. The big question you're probably wondering is, okay, these are all very interesting and they're quite shiny demos, but how do you unlock the value in the manufacturing context? And I think the way we've approached this in Accenture is 3 steps. So explore, experiment, execute. That's nice alliteration. But I think the one that I'd like to focus on for this talk is really that middle part of experiment. In manufacturing industries in particular, it's a lot more complex than some of the media and creative space, where it might be more obvious if you're trying to create a social media post or something that's using generative AI to do this. With manufacturing use cases, as you saw the ones above, you really got to validate that hypothesis first, make sure that the technology is able to support you before you go and scale and go on that roadmap. And the reason for that is important. Last year, there was a study where Harvard researchers looked at the impact on work, and they came up with a term called the jagged technological frontier. Essentially, AI is excellent at some really difficult things, and we're kind of mind blown, but it's also really bad at some stuff that we would normally find easy, and it's very difficult to know in advance. So what we recommend is you need to try it, and you need to actually experiment with real data or realistic data, and with users who know what they should be expecting and have domain expertise. And it's only then that you can really see the value and also how likely that is to get adopted within the context in that manufacturing use case. We worked on this throughout the rest of last year. We're still doing it this year. The 9 use cases that I showed on the slide earlier are the ones that are the most valuable. I obviously didn't show you the ones that didn't work, but there's many more. We tend to do this in 4 to 6 weeks at a relatively low investment, and provide the insights around impact, not just on the direct process, but also on your talent, on your people, on your data, on your architecture, all of the things that are needed to make it really valuable. But we're still learning. So this trend is only just getting started. We've only been going just over a year in this generative AI space. And although we've learned a lot, there's still some things that we're going to discover over the next 1 to 5 years. These are some things that I wanted to call out. Number one, start with your own data. I know it seems really obvious, but you will struggle to do much with generative AI without it. And I don't just mean data by industrial data. It also means your processes, your workflows, your standards, your operating procedures, your logbooks, your, I guess, tribal or expert knowledge that's trapped within expert individuals. Start with that, because this is where the generative AI can be really, really powerful if you're able to get hold of it. Number two, don't fall into the knowledge management trap. You know, it's tempting to start by trying to solve all your enterprise knowledge management challenges with a quick Gen AI pilot in manufacturing business, but don't. LLMs are not natively good at that exact problem. You have to build a lot of things around it to make it fully valuable. And what we've seen in the manufacturing space is you're much better off focusing on use cases that can radically augment existing high-value activities, using that knowledge and data, but to get those workers in those roles adopting and innovating with the generative AI tools in their workflow. You saw some of those examples above that kind of target those very specifically. Number three, you need an orchestra, not a solo artist. ChatGPT, it sounds crazy, but it was so 2022. We are moving very quickly towards multimodal, multi-agent solutions. So you're going to hear the word agent pop up a lot this year. These are specialized virtual team members, essentially, that perform tasks for you and then coordinate with each other and come back to you to help you do the job. And we're going to see that happen a lot this year. So think big in terms of the things you're trying to tackle, because it will be that sort of problem, not just a chatbot, that really solves it. And number four, always a human in the loop. So don't forget, with all this AI agents and sort of talk about things generating things for you, that you need a human who will be collaborating with AI embedded into their existing tools and workflows. You saw this briefly with the Codebeamer and Virtual Mentor demos that were earlier on. You also saw it with how we're doing technical publication generation and test case generation. They're embedded in the tools for people who need those to do that job. These aren't fully automated, running and unsupervised. Not yet, not this year. We're still learning how to actually make sure we make the most out of the human capital that we have and get them adopting these tools. So really remember that. It's only when the human workers trust the AI that they'll adopt it and work in collaboration with it. So important takeaways. Final thing, I can't ignore it. There are risks to generative AI, quite substantial ones. So there are phenomenal benefits, as we covered above, but don't ignore the fact that the results will may be unreliable. The confidence in them might not be good. You need to test it. There may be bias in the models that you need to counter. And there may be lots of questions around liability, compliance, or impact on your own workforce in terms of the work they do and how it changes that over time. So you need to understand all of those. This also is being brought to life by more regulatory standards and more pressures that, as a business, you really need to understand. We at Accenture treat responsible AI as a default. We've been doing that since 2016. We have a program around it. If you want to learn more about that, there's many resources we can point you to, but it's really key, especially with generative AI, where these things are so powerful at creating new materials. I've covered an awful lot at that point. I'm going to take a pause and see whether there's any questions, and we can handle some of those in our Q&A.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan and Jan, for a super interesting session here on this very hot topic. So as I said, I'm now over to the Q&A. So let's open up for any questions from you in the audience. So who would like me to go first here? Otherwise, I had one actually coming up here. And that was about, how to actually, is it actually possible, and how do you actually utilize, AI driving, sustainability in the manufacturing industry? So, both of them being, top of the agenda for many manufacturing companies. So is that something that is on the table for discussions right now, and any hints about that?
It is. There are some initiatives happening within Accenture at the moment where we're looking at using AI to support with sort of sustainability goals and compliance in those areas. So more on the knowledge and compliance side. But if you think about all the use cases that I very briefly touched upon, admittedly. If they're reducing energy usage or optimizing processes or reducing cycle time, the second order effects often have reduced carbon footprint, reduced energy, reduced waste. There's a lot of things that impact sustainability, and I think we want to measure those. So when I talked briefly about the focus on experimentation, we look at not just the bottom line piece, but also the sustainability impacts, the talent impacts, all of the other things that we need to capture as part of such a disruptive technology. So it definitely is a relevant part of this this technology trend, for sure.
Thank you. Could you also share some, maybe ROI numbers in terms of, reduced cost and time by using AI in the manufacturing industry?
If I go back up to that slide that we had before, you'll see, let me just jump quickly to it. You'll see for each different experiment that we've run, the value differs. And I think this is where it's really important to understand which industry are you in, which area of manufacturing are you focusing on, what's your current state of maturity in terms of what you currently do and your data foundation and the work process and the level of automation, and what happens when you go and put this generative AI solution in place to then measure the value. We've seen anything from sort of 80% reduction in times when you're converting functional requirements into the models that are in MBSE systems. And we've seen things that compress cycle time or have dramatic cost reduction in doing sort of inspection and maintenance plans. But it all varies, and it varies not just by the type of use case, but also by the industry and the maturity of that organization. So it's really difficult to pin a kind of number on it broadly. Hence, I think the best way is like, you got to start using these, experimenting and measuring, like honestly measuring whether it works or it doesn't work, because it will open up a whole load of other opportunities that you might not have thought would be possible with this technology. So
thank you.
I hope that helps.
I just add that, I mean, just not just with generative AI, but even I guess the digital proof of concepts of the last 5-10 years as well. I think there's a strong temptation when you're doing a proof of concept or an experiment to just purely focus on the technology. You know, does it do what we hoped it might do? And usually the answer is, well yes, it does. I think even to some degree, you see on the page here with these experiments at the bottom there, quantifying it, and I see a strong temptation always to maybe not do that. So we're not talking about a huge business case piece of work here in doing this, but just to get some clear understanding around where the benefit's going to be, even in the 4 to 6 week pieces that Jonathan said. So applicable for Gen AI, but I think just even more broadly around other types of AI, and other types of digital initiatives. I think we're always keen to make sure that's embedded in, you know, the start, so you don't just prove a technology.
Yeah, thanks. I had one question also from Michael Rosenbaum in the chat here. Can you share some examples of cases you have tested and then failed?
How long have we got on the call?
Right.
There are some interesting ones where I think I take engineering drawings as one, where early on in 2023, we thought it'd be fantastic if we could augment sort of the CAD and the engineering side, drawing side. The models themselves that underpin it weren't as capable as they now are for some of those like vector-based drawings and interpreting those at the level. It's not that they can't do it, but at the level that they need to be to support a very experienced human in that role. It doesn't cut the mustard. It's just probably what I'd say. We will see those become very viable as these models become more and more advanced and powerful. But yeah, I think if you want to contact me on LinkedIn or offline, I can share a lot of things that we didn't see the value in. It's not that it couldn't make a cool demo or show something nice, but is it really valuable to the point where someone will adopt it in the daily workflow? There's quite a lot of things where we had to say no. So.
Yeah, thanks. Another question here also from the audience. Are there any platforms or solutions that actually stands out for different kind of use cases?
Good question. I think from the foundation model perspective, I think the obvious ones are some of the biggest things coming from OpenAI, from Meta in the open source world, and obviously supported by the big Microsoft, Amazon, Google platforms. We've noticed that depending on the industry, you might not necessarily choose to go down the cloud models through OpenAI or through others. You might want open source local models. That will make sense maybe in sort of defense spaces or aerospace. But again, it's not that there's one winner and that we choose it. We actually evaluate different models in the course of an experiment for that client, because certain models perform really well at certain tasks, others don't. And I touched briefly upon this idea of agents. It might be that you have many different models running with different agents and you call upon them for different parts of the workflow. So we don't just pick one platform and use it. We're looking at how do you bring all of the best from the phenomenal amount of technology that's out there and actually orchestrate it to support someone in that particular role.
Thanks. I had another question also from Vishal, and his question is, what are the top 3 use cases the manufacturing industry is already adopting?
That's a really good one. So I think some of the obvious ones at the moment are around the generation of technical publications and documents. I think that's instantly valuable, and it's the technology for that from the large language model perspective has been around a bit longer, 6 months longer than some of the latest things. Also, when it comes to code acceleration, I think it's sort of test script generation for embedded software in automotive is very, very attractive, and where you've got the ability to plug those into existing tools, for instance, the Codebeamer ones or any of these MBSE engineering tools, I think those are very low-hanging fruit that's instantly valuable for people. The one that's, I guess, the most appetizing from an adoption perspective is things more like the virtual mentor for manufacturing that we have, where you're giving someone essentially a co-pilot for an operator on the shop floor to pull in standard operating procedures, logbooks, tribal knowledge, and synthesize it on the fly for where they are in that assembly process. That's probably the mind share, has the most adoption, but it hasn't necessarily been implemented and scaled fully on those ones.
Yeah, right. Thanks. We had another question also from Robert. Would you confirm that also in case of AI is true that garbage in would also result in garbage out?
Simple answer, yes, on that one. It still applies. It applied for traditional AI. It applies just as much for generative AI, yes.
Thank you. And we had another one here as well. Let me see here. From can I generate CAD 3D models with an development and deployment of GPT models?
Like CAD 3D. I've seen some use case on it. We've actually, it's not shown up on the screen, but we have looked into those. So that might be something to follow up offline. There is some really interesting work happening around CAD and CAD models through GPT, but it depends on the format. I don't want to go down to kind of like DXF and DWG and all the different type of formats, but yeah, it depends. It's probably an answer I'd have to give now, but with a deeper dive to understand the exact industry and tool set, I think we could answer that a bit more clearly.
Yeah,
I think I'd add to that, and we've seen it, you know, the last year is the pace of development here is astounding, right? The level of investment of, you know, companies like PTC, Accenture, you know, the cloud providers is so significant. You know, if you come back in 3 months, 6 months, you know, it will have progressed. So I think we're seeing a pace here that is pretty unprecedented. So even, you know, your answer there, Jonathan, we'll have a different answer in 3 months' time. I mean, I think it's that significant, you know, the pace this is moving at.
Right. I will pick a last question here also from Vishal. Can AI be deployed in an environment without internet access, since generally operators doesn't have internet access?
Yes, that is a fantastic question, actually, because it's one for another deep dive. We've developed some things that are entirely offline local, either local in your data center or local on your actual machine and hardware. And that preserves the data integrity. And it also means you can have very, very tailored system level integration with the workflows that you're doing. So it absolutely is possible, and it relies more on open source deployable models as opposed to the big cloud models, and slightly different architectures. But yes, is the answer, and it's incredibly exciting. One for a deep dive session, I'm sure. But yeah, that's I think one of the big branches that we'll see really grow this year.
Fantastic. Time is unfortunately running out quicker than expected, so many thanks everyone for joining, and of course a special thanks to you, Jonathan and Jan, and we will actually try to follow up on the questions in the chat afterwards. So with that, I hope to see you back at the PTC Talks on the 2nd of February for a session about refining ALM strategies for success in the software-defined vehicle by Accenture. So stay tuned for that and have a fantastic weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.